Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner AFRI. AFRI is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it. I have the pleasure to welcome you, Alexander, to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. Finally, we met IRL.
Yeah, it's so fun. I've seen you on LinkedIn so much and on social media. So it's really fun being here and seeing you live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm good. I've had a good night of sleep, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
Fresh air, a little bit of sun. So yeah, I'm good.
That's nice. And you live close to the studio, right?
Yeah. It was only a 15-minute bike ride here, so It was perfect. I managed to get lost one road down here, but otherwise than that,
that's fine.
Good.
Yeah, you managed to come here.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Alexander?
I am ready.
That's good.
Let's go. So
tell the listeners about you. How would you like to introduce yourself, and tell us about your passion?
Yeah. So I love working with sustainability and especially climate change, on solutions for climate change. So renewable energy, timber buildings, low carbon materials, etc. And that's why I've ended up working with sustainability questions at an architectural company. So, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now. And that's one way of introducing me, I would say. For me, working with sustainability has been it's been something I wanted to do since I was little. So for me, it's really interesting being here and seeing how much is happening in this area right now. I think that since I work with in the building sector, it's like a large transformation going on in front of our eyes, and sometimes it's difficult to tell how big this transformation is, since you're in the middle of it. But so I'm really excited about where we are right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now you're working with your passion, actually.
Yeah. I am.
That's amazing. And tell us more about you, like your background, education, family.
Yeah. So the reason for why I ended up working with sustainability questions is because I've been brainwashed since I was a little child. So my dad worked a lot with sustainability questions in the 70s and 80s, 90s. So my whole childhood has been he's speaking a lot and trying out new ideas on me. So I've always had that part, and I didn't realize that. But for me, it's always been a natural part of me that I wanted to work with this because of that, I think. And also, when I was young, he took me and my sister up in the north of Sweden to go hiking in the Swedish mountains. And that has been had a big impact on me. Every year, every summer, we went up there hiking. And just seeing that nature and the rawness of it, I would say, has led me into an area where I wanted to work with that. I wanted to work to somehow, I don't know if protect it is the right word, but I wanted to work with I wanted to work with solutions to fight off climate change.
Mm-hmm. And what did you study?
So I studied environmental engineering, focusing at LTH down in Lund. And I focused on energy systems and renewable energy. So that's my master. So it's, and then I ended up working. So I've always been interested in architecture. And so for me, it was a decision, okay, should I study architecture or should I study environmental engineering? But then I ended up doing this, and I haven't regretted myself so far.
That's good. But now you're working.
Now I'm working
with architects.
at an architect. Yeah, with architects. Yeah,
that's amazing. How do you find it? Is it easy to collaborate with architects?
Yeah, I would say I had a really picture of how architects are. That everybody is very, very creative, and but I would say that there's different types of architects. Some architects are these really innovative, creative architects, and they just do their thing, you know. And then you have the architects that really love details and use drawing small details, and everything should be precise, you know. And maybe not on the creative side for creating new buildings and stuff, but you need both. I would say you need the whole spectra. But yeah, I love working with architects because usually I would say something that architects are really good at is the social sustainability aspect. They often think about the social sustainability aspect of buildings.
How?
And the areas. They want to create something that's good for people. They want people to enjoy the space. They want to create, you know, placemaking. They think about these things naturally, many of them, I would say. And I don't probably. I think more in terms of carbon dioxide and climate change.
So you think like most of the architects thinking or focusing more about like creating the experience by design, experience for people.
Yeah, I think many anyway do that. That's my impression. And also, if you look at many, not just the Link architecture where I work, but also other architectural firms, I see this focus a lot. Like they are usually working with social sustainability questions, which is really, really important.
Yeah. But do you think that architects can really make a change when it comes to reducing the carbon emissions?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I do in my work. I work a lot of hands-on in projects, trying to reduce carbon emissions by working with life cycle analysis and putting up, you know, a strategy or ideas for how can we reduce the carbon emissions in our projects. And working with architects, then I have found is really, really important, because usually the way architects are consultants, of course, but usually the way consultants work is that they produce a report and then they give this report to the project manager, and then everybody looks at this report. Maybe you read a little bit of it, you know, and then at the end of it, they say, okay, this is it becomes more like of a stamp, you know, okay, we managed to achieve this certification. We managed to reduce carbon emissions or not, you know, or it's more like of a status quo. But if you work early on in the stage, which architects do, then you actually have the potential to do change. You have the ability to go in early on and suggest improvements, not only measuring. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand you. So what is like your position and role now in Link's Architects?
So right now I'm a sustainability manager. So but that means I work hands-on in projects, but I also work with broad strategy questions for the company.
Can you mention like to us some of the climate smart design principles?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's an interesting question. You know, okay, so how can we reduce carbon emissions in projects? Because, and since I've worked a lot with it in our projects, I've thought, okay, so how do we do it? And it always starts with this engineering perspective of measuring, you know, quantifying in Excel, you know, everything like that. But then I realized, okay, but there are actually heuristics or principles that you could use. You don't always need to measure, even though I love measuring and quantifying, but there are actually things you can do by just setting up these design principles for the project, so for the project group. And then you could say, okay, we need to work with by reducing the materials. Okay, so if you reduce the materials, then you reduce costs, but you also reduce carbon emissions. We need to work with simplicity. So what does that mean? Well, if we work with, usually if we have a problem in the design phase, usually we have a tight deadline and everybody's stressed. So what they do is they try to solve the problem and they just put more materials on top of the wall. Okay, so we have acoustic problems, we have fire problems. So they just put these gypsum boards on the wall, right? But instead of, and this is because of the stress and that everything is on a tight deadline, but instead of taking 2 steps back and thinking, okay, so why did we have this problem from the beginning?
Yeah.
And then you realize, okay, so actually we can do something with the roof. And if we do this thing with the roof, then we don't need a gypsum on the wall because then we've solved the fire requirements and the acoustics. And this way of thinking, I think, is really interesting because we don't actually need to measure then. We just need to work with these principles. And I know it might sound a bit, so many people would say not scientific, but I would say that these design principles actually are really interesting way of putting forward, because then you don't need to know exactly, but you know, okay, so if we use these principles, then we have the potential of reducing the emissions. And that is something I'm exploring right now. And I think it's actually working quite well. I think people understand these design principles and they get inspired. And also I like the design principles. So there are many different design principles. Simplicity one, reducing, passive energy design, you know, and if you give this design principle, you don't need to give the exact solution. And I like that part also, because many times people think that, okay, so you work with sustainability, then you should give the answer.
Like the exact number.
Yeah. And no, I think we're just in the beginning of this. We don't know the best solutions for reducing carbon emissions in our projects. We have just started exploring this. We don't have, we have ideas on what is good and what is not good, but this is just the beginning. And what does that mean? Well, that means it will develop a lot the next coming 10 years. So in that case, well, then we need to build up a creativity in the project groups and ask, okay, what can you contribute? Because when you start asking questions to these different experts, like construction engineer, acoustics, everything like that, you realize that they have ideas themselves on how they want to reduce. And if you bring in those ideas, and you give room for those ideas, then you really can reduce carbon emissions in a project.
So you have like a kind of template or design principle before when you start every single project. Okay, let's take a look on these, and then let's start the sketching, or how does it work, like in a practical way?
So for me, I've started experimenting with this. So I don't have a set up game plan exactly how to use it. I'm just experimenting with it right now and introducing some design principles in certain projects, and because for me it's a new type way of working, instead of exactly giving the solution. Okay, we need to build in timber, we need to and then see what kind of solutions the group brings forward.
Yeah. So do you see the architects like not really happy about these climate friendly design principles? How do they react when you go to them and say, okay, we need to work with simplicity, material choice, and so on?
No, I think most architects love this type of trying to, everybody wants to contribute. And I think this is actually an interesting question, that it's not only architects, it's all the consultants in the entire design phase. Everybody wants to go to work and feel that they are making a difference. Many people take this climate anxiety home with them, and they say, okay, I need to eat vegetarian, I need to fly less, I need to
buy less clothes.
Yeah. Not driving a car, everything like that. And they have this anxiety, and they think a lot about how can I reduce my carbon footprint, my private carbon footprint, instead of going to work every day, 8 hours, your most productive time of the day.
Yeah.
And you think, how can I contribute by reducing carbon emissions where I work? I mean, if let's say you reduce the carbon emissions, your private carbon emissions by 90%, that's a lot of hours you need to put in maybe to be able to do that. Let's say you go to work and you reduce your project's carbon emissions by 1 or 2%. Well, that's a big difference. I can promise you that if you do that, you have a much bigger contribution on a global scale. But maybe it's, and I don't think people think like that really. But once they realize that this project has a profile of being climate neutral, then most people are very engaged and they want to bring out their ideas, and they're proud of working in that kind of projects.
Yeah. Do you think, because now what I'm noticing, like before, back in days, there was like an architect doing everything, planning everything, an architect and an engineer, then architect, engineer, and like acoustic consultant. And now what we notice here, now we have environmental and sustainability expert within the group.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important, because like some small companies, they cannot afford the money for a sustainability consultant to be part of the group? How should they deal with this? Should they like go for more education, or what do you think? What's your reflection?
It's an interesting question. I haven't thought about exactly how they should try and solve that. I have thought about the role of the sustainability consultants, and one idea that I've thought of is that, well, my ambition is that we are not needed at the end of it. I think that should be the end goal of all people working with sustainability, is that, it should be a natural part of the project. The architect and the construction engineer and the project manager, they should own this question, and the sustainability consultant shouldn't even be needed. And maybe that's a utopia that won't happen. I don't know, but that's one of the things I've thought of, that I don't think that sustainability consultants would be needed in the future anyway. So regarding your question of small companies, well, I hope that I don't have a good answer to that, how they should deal with it. Maybe they should deal with it by, there's a risk of not doing it as well. There's a risk of, taking in this, investing money and trying to build sustainable buildings.
Yeah.
There is a big risk of not doing anything also.
Because of lack of knowledge.
Yeah, they don't build up any knowledge within the company, that they could educate themselves. They could try out stuff. They don't need to do everything at once. They could do something small and start building up that and do an incremental change at a time. And I think that if you start by, okay, let's reduce the carbon emissions by 2%. Well, let's do 2% again. And you build up this knowledge, and suddenly you have this this compound interest rate. So it becomes bigger and bigger. So I think this is important. I think if you don't do anything and you don't educate yourself within sustainability questions in the building sector today, I don't think you'll be a player within the next 10 years. I don't think you're in the game.
Yeah, because the market requires you to be very, I'd say, knowledgeable when it comes to sustainability. And if you don't, then you lose your business.
For sure. There's a reason for why, instance, Vasakronan is, you can see them everywhere, and they're winning prizes for sustainable projects and investing a lot of money in that. There's a reason for why they are doing that. It's because they have realized that this is going to be a really important step within the next coming 10 years. And AFRY as well, working a lot with companies have realizing this, that we need to work with sustainability to survive.
Like making money by sustainability as well.
Yeah. That's an important part of it, I would say.
Yeah. So to understand your answer for the question about the small companies, your advice is that they start with the small steps, like start with exploring what is sustainability, read more, educate your employees, and step by step until you become really strong player.
Yeah. I have, it's always difficult to give advice to other people, right? I would say. Sometimes it's easier to give advice of what not to do. Something that you shouldn't do is not do anything. That's one advice I would give.
Yeah.
Answering your question, I would say, starting small. And I have been in many projects where the project leader comes up and they want to put up a plan for the sustainability in our project. And my impression is that they want to, if it's not going to be 100% perfect, they're not sure they want to take the step. They want to know every single risk in the way. That's not how life works. Life is not about knowing all the risks everywhere. Life is also about, trying out these risks and trying to tackle them. Because if you don't try it, you won't learn from it. You learn by doing. You don't learn by reading. So I would say start doing.
Than experimenting.
Yeah. I think that's the best. That's how I learned all the things I've learned about reducing carbon emissions in projects.
How do you work with this aspect in links architects when it comes to climate? Do you have a specific policies in the office? Projects?
So we have a sustainability compass that we use early on in the project. Which then we have a meeting where we workshop and we think about ideas, because every project is unique and different. So, and this is something that many projects, many companies or architects, they try and focus on everything at the same time. They want to solve all sustainability questions
When you say sustainability, do you mean the social, environmental, and economic?
Yeah, precisely. And then you could divide social sustainability that you're an expert within. Okay, so if I just say social sustainability, I mean, how many social sustainability questions are there?
Thousands.
Yeah. And so you try and solve all of those, and then you try and solve all of the climate change and all the ecological sustainability questions. And if you do that, you don't do anything, I think. So we have a setup where we try and focus a lot about, okay, so which are the important questions in this project and how are we going to solve them? And that is something that's something we're calling impact architecture. So we have these 6 focus areas that we are trying to focus extra a lot on.
Which are these areas?
It is so reducing carbon emissions. It's circularity, which also goes hand in hand. It's biodiversity, and then it's health within the building. So the other 3 are regarding to social sustainability. So it's health, security, and equality. Health. The health part is a lot about trying to make areas where people move and encourage walking or activities,
exercising.
Yeah. How do we design cities that are like that? And I think you are much better probably at that kind of stuff than me.
So you have, this is one, the health. When it comes like to circularity, is more about, are we talking material wise or more system like ventilation, energy?
Both, I would say, because if you look, it's more of a philosophical point of view. The way we work today is linearly. We have, and this circularity part is just trying to make everything, both the business plan, but also the materials within. If you talk about circularity within climate materials, then there's one aspect. Many projects that work with circular materials. They start their project and then they say, okay, we want to use reused materials, right? And then maybe they go and look for bricks and they put these bricks within the building. But there's a different aspect to it, and it's something that we call design for circularity, where, okay, so you put this reused brick in your building, which is really good because it has low carbon emissions. But what happens, this building has an end of a lifetime. So what happens with this brick after it? Many people don't think about that aspect. So that is something that we call design for circularity, where, okay, what will happen with this brick after 50, 100 or 150 years? What will we use the brick for? Is it easy to take away this brick from the building? So that's also an important part of, that's why you don't only want to say that we work with recycled or reused materials.
But this is like not, this is too much for architects to think about, no? Or what is your reflection?
Maybe, yeah. I think that you probably need to specialize become an expert within one of these or 2 of these areas, maybe. So that's something you see, that in the office you have people who are experts in different areas, the same way you have here at AFRY, that you have different groups and different experts.
True.
Yeah.
You don't think it's like the project will cost so much because you bring so much experts to the table, and also you take so much time to think about, to reflect with circular design, think about health. This will cost, like, the project will be so much expensive for the client.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most common obstacles that we face in our projects. It's the cost part. And what I've realized is, if we talk about reducing your carbon emissions and climate smart design, and then also these design principles that we talked about, then you actually realize that the same principles that you use for reducing carbon emissions are also many times the same principles for reducing costs in project. So if you take a couple of hours, 50 hours and early on in the project, and you do these analysis of, okay, how can we reduce the amount of material? Then you realize, okay, we can save a lot of money for our customer. We can, thinking about the design of the building. Okay, how can we reduce the amount of area, or how can we maximize this area? So I think it's not a correct thinking, or there's something wrong with that thinking, that designing climate friendly or climate smart is always more expensive. My impression is that you can actually save money by doing it.
Because if you look to the whole story and not only the design part.
Yeah, because usually the budget is separated within, okay, consultant budget, building material budget, the building budget, and then you realize, okay, so if you start a project and you have 1 or 2 years until it's going to start getting built, you don't know, if the architect or the construction engineer early on in the project finds solutions where, okay, we can save a lot of carbon emissions, but also a lot of money by, let's say, prefab or modules. Well, that would impact the amount of time that it takes to build the building, right? Yeah. This is not something that you would calculate in your budget 2 years earlier. So you don't see that cost. You only see the cost that, okay, the architect is spending 10 or 20 more hours, which you don't want, of course. But then, okay, but we've saved like 200 hours or 300 hours in a later stage.
Construction phase. So you think that we even need to rethink about how to say business model, like not only separate the different activities and phases, but look to the whole story, to the whole phases.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I've thought about that question a bit because it's about risk, right? If you're a consultant, you don't own the risk. But if you're the project manager or you're the one developing the building, you own the risk. If something doesn't work, if the timeline isn't held or the budget is thrown off, then you are responsible for that. You know, if the building needs to be torn down within 30 years, the architect and the construction engineer, they're long gone.
Yeah.
So you won't be able to find them, but you will be able to find Skanska or Vasakronan Castellum. They will be there. So they will get the blame for it. So they own the risk. So my question is, well, in that case, I don't know what the solution to this is, but one way of solving it is that the consultants own the risk also. Either that you have a company that works the whole value chain, or that you have an instrumentation model. How do you say that? Like that you get an instrument that, okay, if we save money, then I get a percentage of that savings. That is very, very seldom in projects today. I would say.
Yeah. And if we talk about like your clients and Link architects, are they more like into the sustainability way of thinking or doing like business as usual?
I would say we have both. We have both. We have really big projects that where we don't have that high sustainability ambitions, but where we try and impact the organizations and usually, and then we also have companies that actively come to us because they maybe have heard about one or two projects that we've done and they want us to help them with their project.
Yeah.
And so we have both of it. And and then that's a question, you know, okay, should you inspire by just producing this good stuff, or should you also try and make this 2%, 3% change in these projects that don't have this clear ambition? Because that is also really, really valuable. You know, if you can do those small percentages in the project that didn't have an ambition at all.
Yeah. So for you, it's like working with the both type of clients, not only with the people who believe in sustainability, but also with the others that not really into sustainability and try to help them somehow. Yeah,
I would say I am torn on this question. I don't know what your opinion is. It would be interesting to hear your opinion. I would say, you know, if you read about this adoption model with early adopters and late laggers, then one way of looking at it is that you should only focus on the people who are really positive and ambitious
into it,
because then they in case become ambassadors and they will spread this ambition and then people will follow. I think Vasakronan is an example of that kind of company that worked with many of these questions earlier on, and now many other companies are following them. So in that case, okay, should we spend our focus, our energy and time on companies like that who are, you know, that have ambitious goals and look for partners that share our values and the same engagement? Or should we actually try and help those that aren't that informed or maybe don't have the same economical possibilities of working with these questions?
Yeah.
What is your opinion on that?
I think we should work with both. The question is, as you know, is much more complicated. But what I think is, of course, we need to go hand in hand with the people that really believe in sustainability and push them for more, because they will be like idols. But also, as you see, like the city is not only about the people who believe in sustainability. We have so many others.
Yeah.
And as a consultant, we need to share our knowledge, and it's our aim is to help everybody like that needs the knowledge. I believe we should also pay attention to those who really cannot really afford that much money to be so much sustainable. And as a consultant, we need to find this like models to help them to step up.
Yeah.
And with a few steps, then they will be also get big and be exactly like the others that are really working hard with sustainability. So I believe we need to work with both.
Yeah.
if our aim is really to build like how to say, a climate friendly city or
Yeah.
buildings, then we need to work with everybody and not leave someone behind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. But then on the other hand, I mean, you only have a set amount of hours every week where you
Yeah.
put your work in.
Yeah.
So then you still need to choose, where do I put my hours in, which companies or which projects do I want to help? You can't help. You can't be everywhere.
No, you cannot. And that's why we are so many offices in the market, and like especially here in Stockholm, we are so many. And I think there are also so many landlords in different sustainability ambition, and I think there is everyone for everyone. So there is someone can help as well. So it's not like, I know we have like a 40-hour per week, and it's very strategical, where do we put these hours. And in the end, I think we need to fulfill this 40-hour with somebody.
Yeah.
So if not with the strong one, of course with someone who needs more like help. And I think you also more, how to say, close to the land, working with landlords, because I'm working more with the municipalities. And I think you see this trend of people start to get, okay, we have to work with this, even if we don't have so much money, but it's time. We cannot like just stay silent and don't do anything. What do you see the market? Where is the market going?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we have this climate declaration that's treading into force now, 1st of January 2022. It feels like the majority of the market is waiting. It's like something's.
It's like a panic now.
No, it's not like a panic. It's more like something's underneath the water, and we don't know what it is, and it's this monster that's coming out, kind of. And for me, a lot of criticism has been aimed at it because it doesn't put a threshold or a limit value for how much a building can release, how many carbon dioxides. For you that don't know about it, then it's a declaration that you have to declare your building, the carbon impact of your building when you build it. But it doesn't limit you in, okay, you need to reduce the carbon emissions by 30%, which would be a really, really important step for working with climate change. But my opinion is that, okay, I think that's important, but I think that this declaration actually will show the whole of Sweden, like everybody needs to do this now, and I think it will exponentially change the market, how we look at it, because the question of how much carbon dioxide the building emits is going to be put on everybody's table.
Do you think people, or what do you see? Do you see people are willing more to live in a climate friendly building, or they don't care really?
Like people,
I mean, like
private people,
because you mentioned that you're the architect designing experience for people and so on. So how do you see the market? Are people here in Stockholm, let's talk about Stockholm, are really fine with living in a non-climate friendly building, or no, they really want to live in a...
I think private persons are very engaged. We talked about that earlier, that many people take this climate anxiety, they go home with it, and they think, okay, what can I do in my life to reduce my emissions? And that's one thing that they think about, I think, is, okay, how can I live in a climate friendly house? People, like a lot of people think about that, I think. And that's also probably why electrical cars are more, growing. And so yeah, I think definitely people want to have their whole cycle of life climate friendly. But then on the other hand, you have this for offices, for instance, which is interesting. There's a lot of offices being built right now, which is in massive timber, in cross-laminated timber or glulam, which is this modern way of building timber buildings today. And it has the potential to reduce carbon emissions. And it's a very clear statement that your building is sustainable today. And so many companies want to affiliate their brand with that type of building. So those projects are actually really well thought of. There's a lot of companies that want to sit in these offices.
Yeah.
So not only on the personal side, but also on the business side.
That people really, how to say, associate the business with a climate friendly building or office.
Yeah. You need to, where you sit, where you live needs to reflect what you want to do. If you work with sustainability and it's an important aspect, then you should sit maybe in a sustainable building. But then that's all, you could think like that, but then you could end up in a situation where actually, okay, let's move from these old concrete buildings to build new timber buildings. That's not a good solution. We need to and there's a lot of people on on LinkedIn talking about this, that the most sustainable building is the building that we don't tear down, or the building that we didn't build.
Never build.
Yeah. So you need to have
think?
that in mind. I think I like that. I like that saying, but I prefer that the most sustainable building is the building that you don't tear down. Because otherwise it's not a building. So if you didn't build it, it's not a building. So
yeah, because like I thought about it as well.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes this word of play kind of.
Yeah, I think so as well. So can you tell us about a project or some projects that focus on climate aspect, like Project by Links?
Yeah, sure. So one of the first project that we started working with this question a lot is then actually a Lidl store in Visby, which is Sweden's first noll CO2 certified or zero CO2 certified store outside of Visby in Gotland, and it's a building where we actually we looked at all the materials in the building. So we have identified almost all materials that go in within this building, and then also measured, okay, what is their carbon emissions? And for people listening, maybe we didn't mention that, but in Sweden anyway, the carbon emissions from the building sector is 20% of Sweden's total carbon emissions.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's actually the building sector actually releases more carbon dioxide than the cars on our roads. And that people usually don't know about that. So that's why it's a really important question. Okay, how can we build a building that has low carbon emissions? So that's what we did with Lidl Visby, this noll CO2 project, and we were able to reduce the carbon emissions by more than 50% in that project by using timber, and then we used this modern cross-laminated timber and glulam. And then we also used a concrete, which has a lower CO2 emissions as a bottom, and then all the materials, the isolation, everything. There was two aspects of it. One was that it shouldn't cost too much, but it should also reduce emissions. So that was also always two parameters that we try to take care of.
But when you say like reduce the emissions, is it by the materials or even later when the building is running?
So I've been focusing a lot on the materials recently, because that is so usually roughly you could say of a building, maybe 50% or a bit more of the carbon emissions from a building comes from the building materials. So when they are produced, when they are transported, and when they are put up on the building site, that's usually more than 50% of the building's total CO2.
Yeah.
And then you have the other aspect, which is then the energy use of the building over the next 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
But you need to remember that part is actually something that we've been working on for decades. So in Sweden, it's quite interesting that, we've been able to build more and more energy efficient buildings. And we've also been able to reduce the emissions from our energy mix. So in Sweden, we have very low carbon emissions from our heating and electricity. So when you look at, and that's something I usually joke that, looking at Sweden is like looking into the future, because if you've done that journey that Sweden has done, reducing carbon emissions from the energy mix, and then also building more and more energy efficient buildings, then you're actually stuck with this big pile of materials that has a large, huge CO2 impact. And that's why I've been focusing on that part, because very few people are focusing on that part. And it's pretty obvious for me that the energy mix globally is going towards more and more renewables and building more and more energy efficient. So if you Google carbon emissions from buildings, you would see almost everywhere. The Nordic countries are quite aware of this, and many other countries. But if you Google for the US or Australia, they don't talk about the materials. They only talked about the energy, the carbon emissions from the energy, which is of course important, but they will do the same journey as we have done here. And when they have done that journey, they will also be stuck with these materials that have a lot of carbon emissions. And then Sweden will already have done this. I mean, we will be able to export our knowledge, we'll be able to export our materials, because everybody in the industry, you know, it's not only consultants talking about this, you know, if you want to survive in Sweden, the timber industry needs to lower their carbon emissions from the building materials. The concrete industry is are doing massive changes right now. The steel industry is producing fossil-free steel.
Wow,
that's unique, you know. And so the whole, like, all different parts of the value chain are working on this question, and I think that's just fascinating.
Yeah. So because now I want to take opportunity and to ask you about like the different industry that are producing the materials. How is it going there? Are they like also being so innovative and thinking a lot about climate?
The materials, or
yeah.
I would say there's a lot of new materials on the market that are
the Swedish market.
Yeah, but also, you know, Northern Europe. That's my where I have my eyes on anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of new materials that is working. There are companies that are producing. You know, you have a concrete slab at the bottom of the building, which usually stands for a significant part of CO2. There are companies that are trying to reduce that, so we don't have concrete. I mean, that we have recycled glass there, for instance.
Okay, alternative materials.
Yeah, and also there are, you know, ventilation ducts being produced in recycled materials instead of steel or aluminum. There are so many companies, and I feel that I work with this question daily, and I think I don't have, you know, I'm always surprised. Wow, does this company exist? They are producing this material. Why haven't I heard about them?
Yeah,
it's weird that there are so many companies and people who are engaged in this question, and you've never even heard about them. So there's so much going on. And then I thought, okay, so if who's really passionate about this and I work with this, don't know about all of these companies and solutions, what about everyone else in working in this building sector?
Why we don't hear about people like working hard with making climate friendly materials or even buildings?
You tell me. What is your theory on that?
No, maybe like the media is not really focusing on them, or maybe I think also, no, to be honest, to be fair as well, I think some businesses and really great hard workers and thinkers, creative people, focusing a lot on the business without focusing about the storytelling and communication. I noticed that in many different, with many different startups and so on, that they're doing amazing products, services, but they're not really good in telling the stories and telling the markets that we are here, we're doing this, like communicating what they do. That's why maybe we're not really hear about them.
Yeah.
It's just one aspect, I think.
I think it's a good aspect, and maybe it's like a fine line, you know, how to spend your time trying to improve your product, and then also trying to get your product out in the market.
Exactly, like to sell it in a more interesting way, not like really selling, but more selling it with what value it generates.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point. But also, I think it's I think that people are afraid of trying new things. And they always think about, you know, trying new materials is a risk, which I understand it is a risk, but we need to take risks. We need to try it out. Yeah. So it's much better to try it out. And that's why I like one of our other projects called Hoppet. It's a fossil-free preschool in Gothenburg, which has got, actually it's a really fun project because it's won a lot of global awards now. But what I liked most about it was that it has this playfulness to the project, and it has a main building, and then it has a lot of complementary buildings, and in all of the complementary buildings they are experimenting with new materials, recycling, you know, all of this stuff, which you would never put in a huge business project because it's too much risk. Yeah. But then you can try it out. So that's one way of trying it out. You know, you try it out on a small building. Okay, let's see what happens.
But was the client part of this? I mean, I guess.
In Gothenburg, you mean, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. They are the ones driving that change. I think Gothenburg's lokalförvaltning should get a huge amount of credit for that. If you Google Hoppet, you will see, well, they've been working with this. They have this really cool vision that they want to Hoppet. So that's the name of the preschool.
It means like hope.
Hope, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the building, but it's also actually a name of the project. So it's not just one building. It's actually a dream or a vision that all future preschools in Gothenburg should be fossil free.
Wow.
And this is then the first one. And then they should take the learnings and the knowledge from this project, and then just keep on going. So the next preschool will be better, and the next one will be better. And that's a really good way of working, because then sometimes, many of these developers, they give all the responsibilities to the consultants, and the consultants gets all the knowledge and expertise. But actually in Gothenburg, in this project, they are building up a lot of knowledge within themselves, and they will bring this to the next project and the next project. So they will just keep on growing, I think.
Yeah, like the client will take the knowledge further to the next project.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, to make or to reduce carbon emissions by architecture and buildings, is that you need like architects with the knowledge.
Yeah.
You need a very engaged client as well.
Yeah.
Because the knowledge is existing, but then it's about the client. Or?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I would say also you need an open mind, and you need to be willing to take some risks. You need to put up early on an ambition. If you say, okay, maybe we build with low carbon emissions, or maybe not, then you probably will end up maybe not.
Yeah.
Because if you have that state of mind early on in the project, you won't take the necessary decisions, actually letting the people working in the projects doing their thing. So it's not only about the architect, it's actually about the construction engineer, it's about the VVS, it's about the acoustics, it's about the fire engineer. Everybody needs to understand that, okay, we're doing this project and we're trying to reduce the emissions in this project. How do we do it?
Yeah.
If you just continue on doing the same thing that you've been doing for the last 20 years, you'll end up with the same thing that you had 20 years ago. So you need to make a statement early on, okay, this is the ambition, and then let people work on it, because people will work. I think that's also interesting, because you focus a lot about urbanism and, how do we design cities?
Yeah.
And isn't this a parallel to that in the past we used to design from top down?
Of course.
And then now we're talking a lot about, engaging from bottom up.
Yeah. Like to co-create with people, with other experts, not only us as planners or architects.
Yeah.
Because like some cities really not functioning, and they are causing so much carbon emissions.
Yeah.
And it's because that it was just one discipline who designed the city.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned in the beginning of this episode, that we need so many different expertise now in order to create in order to reduce the carbon emissions in our cities.
Yeah. And I think that, you talk a lot about that in the urban landscape, if you design cities, that we need to try and I don't know, are we good at doing that today, would you say?
We I will not say yes.
Going bottom up?
Not really.
No.
To be honest, not. We still in the kind of top down, and only the experts, the seniors. Not so many projects that people welcoming other expertise. But now I'm like, this is in general.
Yeah.
Here, like at AFRI, the company I work with, we have like big teams, and this is the cool thing here for me. I think it's very cool that we have like so many different expertise that I just can write them on, on Teams or on the email. Please, can you help me with this? And then I find like a traffic engineer standing next to me, or can you help me with this sewage system or like water management?
And do they help you?
Yeah, they help me. They're like so happy. They're so helpful. But now we are like talking about that you mentioned it needs a mindset and like thinking, and to be like sure that I want to reduce carbon emissions in
Yeah,
my
so
projects.
I think that the projects that I've been in, where we've been able to reduce the carbon emissions a lot, then it's really important that the project actually works from bottom up, where the expertise in the bottom, they project their ideas upwards, and then you take decisions on that, and you let them be creative, you let them work. The project that worked very strictly top down usually run out in the sand, or usually it ends up being just the same regular building, because people don't feel secure. They don't have the time to put in the projects to help the customer actually.
Yeah, there's not so much space for being creative, innovative, and to reflect actually. When it's like too much top down.
Yeah.
And everything is already decided.
Yeah. But in one sense, in a philosophical term, in one sense, letting people work from bottom up actually requires a very strong top, because the top needs to actually very clearly state, okay, we want you to work creative, and then say that to the bottom, if you want to put it in a hierarchical point of view. But yeah.
But this needs like a very
strong leaders.
Brave leadership.
Brave leadership, yeah.
Like if you really want to people be creative and contribute to the big, how to say,
cause.
Then you need to be really brave and let them do it.
Yeah. And you don't know you don't know the solution. You don't know what's going to happen, but you take that, you're willing to take that risk, and you go down that road, and you learn from it. And usually you end up fine. Usually you think so? Usually you come out stronger.
How was the story with the Lidl and with the school?
Yeah, I mean, both of those projects have been, from their point of view, they're taking a risk doing this. Nobody had ever done it before. And well, they will have to answer that question. But I can say that, well, Hoppet is now winning many global awards.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's congratulations to them. I think it's amazing. And Lidl Visby has been in the media everywhere, and they are a company that's been maybe struggling with their identity in Sweden. Who is Lidl, and one way of trying to make them stick out is becoming more sustainable. And now they are, like, their buildings are maybe the most sustainable buildings within that sector. Wow. They've really done a journey in that. And I think that's a really cool journey to follow, actually.
And I think I would love to interview them, but I think it's about the leadership, that they really they really want to be number one.
Yeah, I would say it's really interesting. I would recommend interviewing Matthias Tas. I think he's a really interesting character who actually gives a lot of, he takes on a strong leadership role, but then also permits the group to do trust the group also.
Yeah, exactly. Build that trust.
Yeah.
How is it going for you, like working as a environmental expert with architects? What are the challenges that you're facing?
Okay, so that's a broad question, I would say. One of the challenges I'm facing is something that we talked, we mentioned briefly before, was that I get a feeling of lack of focus, that people are trying to run at every sustainability. They don't know which sustainability question to focus on in where, and they just try and focus on everything. So that's one of the challenges, trying to get projects and companies to focus on 1, 2, or 3 main challenges and do them really, really well. And many people won't agree with me on that. I think many people always want to have this holistical view, which I think also is important. But I really believe that you need to have a focus. If you can't solve all problems at once.
I can relate to the challenge that you're mentioning now, because here when I started work on AFRI, I developed a kind of SDGs, like what do you call it, tool?
Yeah.
To focus on like very, very few goals.
Yeah. Because
you cannot really work with all the 17 at once. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
That's why we have so many different, because like you need, it's difficult to work with all of them.
Yeah.
So the tool is about, okay, let's focus on some of them more with the quality that we really contribute to this, and not say, we work with all of them.
We work with everything.
And it's not really true.
Yeah. That's used, because that's the risk of doing that is then greenwashing, that you say you work with everything, but then actually you don't do it. You're just talking, and so I think that's important. That's an important stance to make for yourself. Okay, so how am I contributing? I'm not saying that's applied for AFRI. I'm just saying that's applied for all companies.
All of us.
Yeah.
All of us.
Everyone. Yeah.
So what are the other challenges? That this is one, focusing on like solving or contributing to one of sustainability aspects. What are the others that you face in your...
So one pretty cool challenge, I would say, right now is many times when we work in a project, so let's say we're building a wall, and then we look at these two walls. So this is really common in the climate when we're trying to reduce the climate or the carbon emissions. So we look at these two different walls and we say, okay, which one is the better from a carbon perspective or carbon emission perspective? And then you say, okay, so wall number A, it's made of timber, it's better. And then compared to wall number B or C, and you compare these, but then actually, and then you do this analysis. But then you realize, okay, but wait a minute, we're only analyzing these two different walls. And actually, the project is much more complex than this. And the wall in itself is part of the building. And the building is, you could look at it as a system. So choosing wall number A actually will change what the slab will look like. It might change how much windows you need, what the roof will look like. So one change here changes everything. It becomes like a myriad of changes. This is a challenge I'm facing today. How do you take that into account? Because in one way you want to have, these, what does this change mean in the rest of the building? People don't think about this. I've realized in many projects that focus on the climate change, they don't think about this. They just compare wall versus wall. But if they do think about it, then it's okay. But how do we do it in a reasonable way? Because you can't go into too much detail, because then you'll end up, spending too many hours on nothing, kind of, at the end of it.
Yeah. Do you believe that, like, because in the podcast, as you know, I talk a lot about smart cities and so on. Do you believe like artificial intelligence will help architects with doing this kind of choices?
Yeah, for sure.
You think so?
Yeah, there's this digital era growing right now. So I think that we're in a transformation age of, going from concrete to renewables materials. I think we're in a transformation age of, building buildings with lower carbon emissions and climate neutral buildings. But I think we're also in a transformational age of digitalness, where we're going to more and more parametric design. And parametric design is then, as you mentioned, AI or machine learning, where the computer then becomes the architect and kind of the architect in a way. You could definitely see a future within, 5, 10, 15 years, I don't know, where the computer actually does a lot of the things that the architects do today could actually be done by a computer. And that's also interesting, because Link Architectures actually have hired a lot of people who are really good at just parametric design.
Cool.
So I'm not an expert within that field, but I'm really amazed about what the computers can design and what it can do.
So like it's more based on data.
Yeah. And then actually you could put up a couple of parameters. You say, okay, I want to build with this amount of glass, but I still want this amount of daylight. I want this amount of sun hours in summer and in winter. You put up all those parameters, and then the computer just goes through it, beep, 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 and then you get this complete building, and it's designed the building for you. Some people are discouraged by this idea that they want humanity in the building, and I think, but maybe you could have both. Maybe you could have the computer doing the rough design, and then the architect comes in and brings in the humanity to it.
I believe in that as well, because many people are afraid of this kind of tools or AI, machine learning. They be like, are we gonna lose the soul of the buildings? There will not be life there. And I was thinking, okay, but let's say AI do the business. I mean, like calculating, and because they can think faster than us. Of course, it saves so many hours. And the hours that we save, let's focus on creating the life between buildings. Okay, or in the buildings. Okay, how do we create a good experience? Because like the AI solved the climate issue. By the design or by the material somehow.
Yeah.
So I think we have to work hand in hand.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's not like, okay, we give the job to AI, or no, we keep it for us.
Yeah.
Because we have to face this. It's happening.
It's inevitable.
Mm.
Yeah. But also I think another argument to that is, we might lose the soul of the buildings. I feel that we've already lost the soul of many of the buildings that are being built today. I don't think they are being built for humans. They're being built for economical returns. That is the main driver in many projects. And if you go back and you look at what was built during the 1800s or 1900s, you look at those buildings, and those buildings are buildings that people love. And then it's like, okay, so why do people love those buildings? Well, it's maybe because they have so much details, and there's they're not perfectly geometrical shapes. They're actually uneven and stuff. And then the question is, well, one argument for why buildings look the way they look today, I'm not saying this of all buildings. And
of course.
But many people say that, well, then you could see it as AI or parametric design actually enables this type of buildings again, with more details, with more, because it reduces the hours you need to put in the project, but also the computer can help you with this type of design. Or if you have 3D printing, etc., you could print out facades that have this detail. People say, well, we can't do it because it costs too many hours. Well, a computer doesn't cost hours.
Exactly.
So there are also possibilities of bringing the soul back into our buildings with this.
So you believe strongly that technology can help us a lot with reducing carbon emissions in our buildings?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for sure.
Great. So jag bara tänkte fråga det här med why no one will thank architects.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let me ask. So we talk a lot about design, architecture, and climate change. But to be honest, why no one thanks architects that do the most for climate change? Why?
Yeah, so this is something that I said to provoke before, and it's a realization I got that if you really want to reduce the carbon emissions, it just struck me, I was working in this project, and it just struck me that, okay, so the best thing we can do if this building during the premise that this building needs to be built, then the absolutely best thing we can do is build this building so it doesn't get torn down within 50 or 60, 70 years. And many buildings today get torn down after this amount of years. And it's not because of the materials, it's because of the financial investment criteria. It's more profitable for companies to build new. So, and maybe because the building is not flexible. So when you look at the carbon emissions of a building, the architect can present you solutions. Okay, change the material from concrete to timber, then you're able to reduce the carbon emissions, right? But if you show the customer that you've built a flexible building, nobody will know until after 50, it will only be known after 50, 70, or 100 years. If the building is still there, then you can thank the architect.
Yeah.
But you won't know this. And this is the absolutely biggest impact you can have in a project. If you design a building that people love, that isn't torn down, that is used for a long time. So all the buildings that we look at today that are still standing, well, thank the architects that did those.
Yeah. I think, I understand your point.
Yeah.
It's super interesting.
Yeah, and in a project, nobody, if I'm presenting solutions to the customer and I say, okay, change the material, we can reduce the carbon emissions by 20%. But then, and then the project gets a lot of publicity and people are happy. Oh, we reduced it by 20%. But nobody tells a story of the building that didn't get torn down.
That's still existing
in 100 years in the future. Nobody thanks anybody for that. But that's the biggest thing you can do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do we have in Sweden the needed tools that help us to reduce emission when we design?
Yeah, for sure. We have many different tools, and we were talking about that also. It's a new area, so there are no set tools that, okay, these are the best tools right now. There are you can work in the 3D model, you can work in Excel sheets. You can work with cloud-based calculation tools. there are different types of 3D tools. We talked about the parametric design. Well, you can use that. You can also use regular type of 3D models that can help you reduce the carbon emissions in the projects. And it's a really cool it's a cool field to work in now, because there's many new companies, many new products being released all the time.
That's amazing. So it's so much fun for you.
Yeah, it is. It's almost too much going on. I don't know how to,
catch up.
Yeah, I feel.
No, but I'm really happy we're having this conversation. I learned a lot actually, because for me, I'm not only I don't have so much knowledge when it comes to reducing the emissions about buildings.
Yeah.
But now I learn a lot, especially with the design principles. I think it's very, very, very helpful.
But I think in one way, actually, nobody thanks the person who designs something that isn't torn down. Actually, you are working with that, because you work with the social sustainability part, places that people love, where people want to stay. So actually, that is a requirement for not tearing down, a city. If you build a city where people live,
exactly,
you're working with that part. So nobody is actually thanking you for your carbon emissions reducing abilities.
Yeah. So we are in the final section of this interesting episode, and it's gonna be more about you, about Alexander.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first question. If you are not a human and you will be an animal, which animal will you be and why?
I would say tiger.
Tiger.
Yeah, tiger.
Whoa.
I love tigers.
Because of?
My mother comes from England, so in the summers we used to go. There's no tigers in England, but
you're the one.
Yeah, but we used to go up visit my granddad and grandma in England, and every summer he had always taped these VHS tapes and BBC documentaries.
Yeah,
and they were always the tiger ones, and I've always loved them. I think they're so cool animals. They're so gracious and they look beautiful, but then they're also deadly.
Yeah, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I like those.
Tiger.
Yeah, tiger.
Interesting. And what is your favorite building?
My favorite building. That's a good question. I would say it's a building in Spain, outside of Barcelona, I think, called La Fábrica Cementa, something like that. It's actually an old cement factory, which isn't in production right now, but an architect remade it into a living area. So it's like this huge cement factory, which is a house now.
Wow!
And I think that's like, and then also it's really cool because the area around it the nature has really taken hold of it, and that's like the story everywhere. If you leave an area, the nature takes over.
Yeah.
And this is really a statement of that, where trees are growing on top of the building. I think that's just such a cool building because of also the point of view, where maybe we are going from an era of concrete everywhere to maybe not concrete, maybe using concrete where it's needed instead. So it's like it's a metaphorical statement as well, maybe.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I will Google this building, actually. Yeah. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And how about public spaces? I work with urban planning, and now I'm so interested in knowing what is your favorite public space.
Okay, so how would you know that the answer to that question? Would you say that, okay, this is my favorite spot, or is it a spot where you actually visit a lot?
It's
how would you define it?
It's like you choose a public space that would you love to go there, like when you wake up, or now if I ask you, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
You pick up a public space that you want to go to.
I love going on Söder. I feel at home at Söder, at around Mosebacke or Mariatorget. I really like those areas. I don't know. I always get a familiar welcome when I'm there.
That's cool.
Yeah. What is your favorite spot?
I have many actually, but mine is a bit not like a traditional one. I like the Piazza Duomo in Milano, like in the front of the church.
Wow.
It's very big.
Yeah.
It's like the scale is not really a human-friendly scale, but there I see people. And when I see people, I go crazy. Like when I see people walking, sitting on the edge,
Wow.
It's like, it's really beautiful. I like the architecture there.
Yeah.
So these three elements, and also the R's,
Yeah.
it's very popular there. So I love that place.
Wow.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. It sounds awesome.
Yeah,
I also like the aspect of having a lot of people in the surroundings.
yeah.
Actually, one of the places I'm thinking about when you mentioned that is Västra Hamnen in Malmö, because I love that place because there's so many people always walking there, and then you can just jump into the ocean. It's such a cool place where you have people meeting nature, kind of.
Exactly.
I
It's
love
like
that,
this
actually.
beautiful transition between.
I changed my answer.
No, but also Jan Gehl,
Mm,
he says that people brings people.
yeah.
So if you have people, bring more people, and it's like a attraction. It's creating
Yeah.
more attractions. And we love to be places where there are other people as well.
Yeah. Is that why cities are just growing and growing?
Yeah. It's like people, I'd say, create businesses, destinations, and so on.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So what are your hobbies? Do you have time
Yeah,
for your hobbies?
I do. I try to train a lot. And when I train, I love playing beach volleyball.
Wow.
And it's also for me a social. I have my friends are playing beach volleyball, so it's combining the social part and the training physical part. So I play a lot of beach volleyball.
How do you do that in Sweden when the weather is?
Actually,
Don't tell me there's indoor.
Yeah, there's an indoor facility in Södertälje. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm not that good at it, but I love playing it. And people think that Sweden can't be any good at beach volleyball. Actually, we have 2 young kids playing beach volleyball now who are 18 and 19, Jonathan and David, Åman and Helvig, they're called. And they are like maybe top 30 in the world.
Wow.
They are really, really good. And our neighbors in Norway, Anders Moll and Christian Sørum, they're called, they won the Olympics.
Really?
Yeah. So when you ask like, how can you play beach volleyball in Sweden, I get that question all the time.
Yeah.
Well, Norway are the best in the world.
How?
Yeah.
With the indoor
I don't know.
facilities.
I don't know.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So they beat all the Brazilians, all the Americans, everybody.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're playing a lot. What are the other hobbies, or only this one?
I love cooking. I love cooking. That's something I like to do. I like reading a lot of books. I do that a lot, and taking walks. And usually I combine those two. So I listen a lot on audiobooks.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's my best.
Saving a lot of time.
Yeah. Combining those two. I love that. Just thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are a couple of my hobbies.
That's amazing. Did you develop any new hobby during the COVID? People start to play instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get something new or no?
I haven't reflected on that. I haven't reflected at all.
Because many people actually got a new hobby during the COVID, like started with something new.
No, I don't think so. But no, I don't think I started a new hobby. Maybe I should have. My Corona hobby. Do people keep on their Corona hobby?
No, I think after the pandemic, they'd be like, this was a pandemic.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now we are in the last 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first one is going to be you giving us, the listeners, 3 takeaway messages.
3 takeaway messages for building climate smart, or?
Yes. Or in general, like climate smart, leadership, personal, you decide.
Well, then I would say, start by doing, take risks. And, if you don't know exactly how to build a climate smart building, well, you need to start. You need to start by trying and doing that. And then you would learn, because put yourself in a situation where you have small errors, I would say. That's something really important. The second thing is that if you want to build a climate smart building, is instead of trying to figure everything out 100%, use a couple of design principles and give those to the project group to work around, and everybody can take their own take on those design principles, how to reduce the carbon emissions, and let that create creativity. And I think that was like actually 5 in 1, so maybe I'll leave it there.
Awesome. And the last question is going to be you asking it to us, not me.
The listeners, or?
Yeah, you ask me and the listeners one question.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I would really want to know the listeners what their best idea for reducing carbon emissions for buildings would be. That would be really cool, because I don't think that all alternatives are there. So, okay, listeners, if you have solutions, write them somewhere. Is there like a...
So, no, they can send it to you on LinkedIn.
Okay, send them on LinkedIn or email Mustafa, email bomb him. And also, if you have companies that are working with these type of solutions with new climate smart materials, let us know. That I would love to hear about from all over the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alexander. I'm very inspired by the conversation.
Inspired. Thank you, Mustafa. It was awesome being here.
Likewise. So hopefully see you again and to talk more about interesting topics as well.
Yeah, let's meet up at Mariatorget.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ciao.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.